Seth, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you, Scott. How we doing?
Dude, it's raining here. It's kind of gloomy and dreary. It feels like October is setting in. It's Chicago is going to shut down for 7 months, right? Just I'm trying to enjoy the last days before the heat comes on, buddy. I
We
tell
we
you.
had our sweet little window. I'm actually on the East Coast this weekend for a wedding. And it's been crappy, but it's beautiful here today. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to stick my fingernails into the last gasp
The
of
last
fall here, and well, it's nice and we can be outside. So,
we
but here we
knew.
are at our computers again. So
That's right, bro.
perfect.
And I tell you, and it's, to kind of offset this dreariness, I got to be honest with you. It is gloomy out. We were talking about just to our audience here topics. What are we going to talk about? And I thought, oh, maybe Halloween or something here and there. It's fall, but one that just is going to be so much fun, and one people love are just good old fashioned scandals. I find,
Absolutely. Everybody loves a scandal.
I mean, who doesn't? And why is that, Seth? What is it about our human nature? Why you can always bet that a scandal will sell?
It's a
Because it
good
does
question.
sell.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And there's a whole, whether it's, it's celebrity tabloids or even like a scandal within your office. I think
Yeah.
it's fun to talk about something salacious that doesn't have to do with you.
Yeah.
It's weirdly a way to bond without really bonding. Like if you're
Yeah.
talking about someone else, you're not really bonding, but it's a good way to kind of connect and talk about something juicy. I just think people it's a lot more interesting than talking about, what you did over the weekend. I think it's always looking for an exciting, intriguing, scandalous story. I think people crave that.
I think as well from I won't say philosophical perspective, but there's something very satisfying when someone rich or famous goes down, right? I don't know what it is about our human nature. Maybe it's our competitive ego, but we like to see certain people fail.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it goes farther than that because I think
Yeah.
we like to build people up,
Yeah.
and as on the rise, and then at a certain point, a switch flips, and we want to see them fall. It's like, no, you've gotten more than your fair share
Yeah.
of applause or recognition or credibility. We like to build them up, and we like to tear them down, and sometimes multiple times.
Yeah.
So there's no surprise that there's no shortage of scandals, and frankly, we'll go into this, but in music, sometimes a scandal ain't the worst thing for your career, right?
Oh, you almost think a PR agency are behind these, especially now where it's the attention economy, right? There's so much crap going on just to capture someone's unadulterated attention for a minute is so intensely difficult. So you're like, you know what? We got to create a scandal. And it could be intricate, but I think some of these that we've looked at, it's always consistent. I think if you're selling newspapers, you're selling media, what is scandal sells.
Yes.
It's like sex, right? Like people want to hear bad shit going on. And
Yeah.
it's bizarre, right? Because it's like, hey, it doesn't sound mentally, I don't say benevolent. Like, I want to see you fall. But there's videos about people falling on the ground. There's people fights, everything. Look on
It's
TikTok.
the whole internet, basically. Yeah, it's the whole internet. And I
It's
think
hating.
like it's in to kind of go along with what I said before, just celebrities in general, you deify them, right? They
Yeah.
don't almost seem human sometimes.
Yeah.
And so weirdly, well, if it's bad enough, it can be detrimental. But I think sometimes a good scandal will help humanize a celebrity, whether
Yeah.
it be musical or otherwise, so people can be like, oh yeah, sort of the stars, they're just like us, corollary of, they made this mistake or they got a DUI or they whatever. Like those are almost relatable.
Yeah.
And which is nothing to speak of like relationship type stuff and cheating and all that. And I would say for the most part on this list, we'll go into it in a bit, but we steer away from that and we do either we focus on the craziest, the biggest, the most extreme, or the funniest. Like we tried to get a good mix in here that wasn't just like
Yeah.
celebrity A sleeps with celebrity B and celebrity C is mad. We broadened it a bit and made it a little more salacious, if you will.
Exactly. Even just by nature of rock and roll, right? One segment of music, it's almost like Aerosmith parties with drugs. Like, is that even a scandal? That's more like you showing up for a day at work. Like I brought
Yes,
my lunch. It's like,
it's
okay,
part of the job. It's lunch pail. Punch in, punch out. Get shit
it's
faced.
like,
Yeah.
okay, man, if you don't do drugs, that's the scandal. If you
Hmm.
don't cheat, if you don't do anything sketchy. Now, some people take that to the nth degree, but there's just something here that I just think that people, it's so fun to see someone fall because it almost makes you feel better. So, as you said, these gods, right? What did it say? The harder they come, the harder they fall.
Yeah.
And so enter all these characters that we have in front of us with their scandals. And I got to be honest with you, Seth, some of these I couldn't stop laughing because
Yeah.
they're just, like you can't manufacture something. Some of this is like we'll go through. It's like, yeah, okay, they're a rock star, whatever. But some is like, dude, there are some deviant bastards out there.
Yeah, and some of them I know there's so many unconfirmed honorable mention type stuff. You mentioned Led Zeppelin like the or Aerosmith, but Led Zeppelin the crazy stories about all sorts of sex scandal,
Yeah,
crazy like it's just completely pushing things above and beyond what is appropriate and never getting challenged on it because like you said when you build scandal into your brand
yeah,
it's hard to blow people's skirts up. It's hard to
yeah.
blow people's minds if
Uh,
you're known for it. But it's almost like the squeakier clean the celebrity, the more interesting the
That's
scandal. I
what I was saying.
think.
To me, some
Yeah.
of the best scandals I've read are those like, especially the far right Christian preachers that end up sleeping with Cuban boys in an Idaho bathroom. Something where it's like they're so hypocritical that you just have to watch it. I think there was
Hmm.
that Ted Haggart guy that was condemning homosexuals, and then the dude's doing meth with a gay hooker. I just thought,
Yeah.
just
Good
those are
memory. That's an
those
absolute classic right there. Yeah.
so going into music here, let me just say this, Seth. You and I you doing some research and whatnot, and when you talk to friends or colleagues or whatever, what's the one that just first came to mind for everyone, or it was there one that was a
For
consistent? Yeah, when you say
for the list of
scandal,
scandals, the one I think that jumped out to me that I was amazed how many people mentioned it were the Ozzy Osbourne, the
yeah,
famous scandal about biting the head off of a dove and subsequently biting the head off of a bat. I think that's one that like it's really crazy. It definitely happened a couple times. There's pictures of it. It's relatively harmless unless you're like a PETA person, but
yeah,
it's just so crazy in a line so cleanly, I think, with his persona that it's very hard to forget. And so I think
yeah.
that's a scandal that like it's so crazy. Anyway, it's crazy. But
That's the one that I had, and that's the one that people, at least in my age group, they all said that because I think it's almost like the cliche scandal of a rocker. But I remember just for our audience what happened in the scandal. There was two parts. Seth, you mentioned both, but the first one was the A&R. It was Sharon Osbourne presenting. I didn't even know if they were married at the time, but presenting Ozzy to I think it was. I'm not sure what record label it was. And for the launch of Blizzard of Oz, his debut album, he was going to release these doves, and he bit off the head of one of these doves, and apparently the executives were puking, and it was just abhorred.
yeah, there's a wild picture of him like he's got
Yeah,
it in his mouth and it's like there's like blood dripping down and he's smiling like I mean it's wild. It's wild.
it
It's
is
very
wild. And I'll tell you this, as a kid, and it was 1980, 81 when that came out. I was just a kid and I heard about that story. It was circulating throughout our elementary school. Like the
yeah.
album covers, everything. And it was like probably the first scandal in rock that I had heard about. Subsequently, you heard him, all these, and who knows if it was true, but he bit the head off a bat. He thought it was a toy bat in
Yeah.
concert. Another great one, this is more of a rumor maybe than a scandal, but it goes with it, is that he gave out a box of puppies and he said before he plays, they have to be killed.
Yeah. I don't even know if that one feels like a bit apocryphal. We can't confirm the
No,
bat one for sure. The puppies one is I mean, if you want to piss off the internet, talk about we joked about like what would be a scandal back then versus today. That would be a career ender today if
oh
that really happened, or even was rumored to have happened for
yeah.
sure.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that's cancel. That you're just
Yeah.
saying I don't want to be in this career anymore. And what's the most efficient way to go to obscurity? Well,
To
let's
torpedo my career.
yeah,
Absolutely.
let's just kill some puppies here. Seth, they're beyond Ozzy, which to me is almost cliche. That was his stick, right? I'm wild. It's shock rock. So the scandal was like almost reinforcing, right? Like a model going into porn. Like, oh my God, it's like I can't believe that. Yeah, you can. I mean, that they were doing this, and but the ones that you said were surprising or bizarre. I got to tell you, Chuck Berry's just freaked me out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
it's if you want to go into the specific, it's like creepy. It's such a bummer because he's such an important person in the history of rock and roll
yeah.
and guitar rock and all that stuff. But for a lot of people, I think this story is his legacy. Why don't you give a little? I
Okay.
mean, there's not that much to it, but
Well,
give some context.
it's hard now because I think most people based on bandwidth are on Pornhub, right? And there's categories about cameras and secret cams. Apparently, Chuck Berry had a potty cam, right? Toilet cam in his restaurant in Missouri, I think around St. Louis, where he's originally from. And it was a whole scandal. 59 women came out and testified against it, that he was checking them out in the bathroom. Now, I don't know what he said. He was trying to find a thief, catch them red-handed, obviously maybe stealing stuff when they're going to, in the bathroom. But 59 women. I
Yeah,
mean,
very interesting strategy if you're trying to catch someone stealing things, to put it
what
there.
do you say to that? 59. I mean, like the dude he's got a dark side, as do I don't know if we've mentioned our dark sides, but I wish I was that imaginative to have a toilet cam, but that's
We're gonna edit that out. We're gonna edit that out for sure. Nobody heard that. But yeah, I mean 59, those are Cosby numbers right there. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
and
it was
good.
there's a class action suit. He had to pay them over $1 million. Right. That was the total bill. So the dude
And
was
this
just
was in
creepy.
the 80s, right? Or maybe early 90s. It was sort of
Yeah.
late. He was like an old man at this point,
Yeah.
which made it
Dirty
creepier
old
and
man.
almost like sad. Yeah, I don't know. It was not a fun scandal, and definitely is the one of the first or second lines of his obituary, probably, right?
I mean, it blows my mind. Here's a dude, he's a Hall of Famer, like pioneer of rock. Did you just not think? And we shouldn't even go to those because this is beyond logic. So that was one that I just was like, what? But there's someone here that are just bizarre too. I know that you were talking about. So what's one set that you just found like, holy shit?
Well, this is one that I had not heard before. So this is more somewhere between scandal and conspiracy. And I'm curious your thoughts on this. Is the quote unquote assassination of Bob Marley. So
Yeah.
so the official story is Bob Marley died of cancer. But
Yeah.
there's a story that alleges he was given a gift of like soccer shoes, soccer cleats by this kind of this photographer who's coming to film him and his friends playing
Yeah.
soccer, just kind of almost like behind the scenes footage. And I guess the toe, something in the shoe pricked his toe, and
There was a nail.
hurt him at the time. There was a nail, yeah, a nail in the shoe. And then 6 months later or something, that had somehow had turned into, had metastasized into cancer that ultimately ended up killing him. And then that photographer supposedly had some connection to the CIA.
Yeah.
Like it's this big convoluted. I mean, this feels, like I said, walking the line between scandal and conspiracy. I don't know if you have more detail, but this is the first time I'd heard this one, and I would love to know more.
First time. And I've seen many documentaries on him. Okay. And they've never mentioned the CIA conspiracy. It reminds me a little bit of your story about Stevie Wonder actually not being blind, that everyone's in on it.
Yes.
Which I would love to uncover that story. That would make it instantly famous and hated.
I still think the funniest thing would be like in his very last years that Stevie Wonder just came out. And he's like, just so you guys know, before I go, I was never blind. I'm waiting for it to happen. I think he's in on the joke enough that it may once he's truly kind of like done performing, I think it's maybe, just fingers crossed, we'll see someday. But
the ultimate. And I think at that announcement, Tupac comes out and says, yeah, man, I agree. I've been hanging out with.
She's like, we're dropping some scandals on you guys. Boy, do I have some news for you.
Yeah, like the
Steve Jobs, come on out, baby. You come too.
It's like
Oh,
the internet would literally break.
oh yeah.
That was, I think that one, yeah, that was a bit intriguing. Another scandal that I thought was I was sad almost was the Jim Morrison, right? In March of 69, Jim and the Doors, right? The frontman of the Doors played in Miami in Florida, which at the time was a little more conservative. Right now, I think again we have to look at it was a southern state, right? It's not like playing in New
Yeah.
York or LA. And apparently he masturbated on stage in front of
Allegedly, apparently, definitely
allegedly.
exposed himself.
Yeah.
I don't know if he, yeah, yeah, but
Okay.
but this is a perfect example of something where like this would definitely not fly today. But to be like pulled off stage and arrested and
Yeah.
banned from performing in the state, like
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as big a deal now, I don't think. Man, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think it would be. I mean, you had this thing with the wardrobe scandal with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. You have the twerking from Miley Cyrus. You have all these things now, and sex and porn. I think people are like big deal, like really
Yeah.
big deal. And I think it's, as you said, or we established, it sells. So it's like they're pulling a big hoax on us. Like the media, the PR agencies are like, Madonna kissed Britney on stage. Oh my God, what a scandal. Hey guys, look at the ratings. Look at this.
Yeah.
As you
Such a
said,
manufactured scandal.
and
Yeah.
it's so manufactured. And that's the part where, and that's where it's that fine line, though, Seth. Then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, this Michael Jackson was doing this. You're like, okay, that's not a scandal. Now that's criminal. Like
Yes. Yeah.
now we
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it. R. Kelly, we don't want to talk about it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
no, now that's not about Aerosmith. It's not about throwing TVs out the window. This is real. And you're like, okay, I get it. But like Jim Morrison at the time, I think it was, listen, he allegedly said to his manager as he walked off stage, I think I exposed myself. I actually watched, I heard footage, so I've listened to, and if anyone has the chance, listen to the concert where he did this. He's drunk. They try to play one song and he rants for 15 minutes about like philosophy, and he calls everyone slaves. It's pretty fascinating. There's a lot of wisdom in there as well. But I
Yeah,
will say this:
to throw back to an early episode, we all agree that Jim Morrison would be very annoying on Twitter.
insufferable, bro.
And that
Like,
only reaffirms it.
imagine him doing dancing on TikTok. Yeah,
Oh my
you can
gosh.
light this fire, everyone. 5,000 views, everyone.
He'd be 400 pounds, no question in my mind, all day.
But I will say he was scared, and you watch the interviews after the scandal and you can see the fear in his eyes. The federal government, faced imprisonment, and the guy jets off to Paris. That one, like, not a made for TV movie. Phil Spector, however, the world famous producer, that's a made for TV movie right there. Convicted of
Hmm.
murder. Like, that's a bizarre story, like sad
Yeah.
and very sketchy.
And
I
frankly, like for him, that is like that is the final capper on a career of sketchiness. Like I think
Yeah,
he was the guy that always was like just a weirdo. Like he looked weird, he acted weird. He has so many accusers from women, but then the scandal being he actually like shot and killed his girlfriend, was it, right?
yeah, and blamed it on, like, it was suicide. But you see him, right? You remember him in the 60s and 70s. He had worked, just to tell you, world famous producer, did the Wall of Sound in Detroit, produced so many albums with John Lennon. It was the world greats of music. And they
Yeah.
respected him. John Lennon idolized this guy. And is even featured in some movies, I think, with Quentin Tarantino and
Yeah.
and just any case, you see him
Immensely talented, but just a
insanely
monster,
a
monster,
monster.
weirdo person.
And
Yeah.
then you have, on the other side, you have like Sid and Nancy, right? Sid Vicious and Nancy, right? Of Sex Pistols. There was a murder. He was convicted of murder, of literally beating her to death, and he was high on heroin. Then eventually, before he went to trial, he died of a heroin overdose. So like scandal, but like dark. Like that's where
Yeah, that
Rocco's like dark. Like that's not fun to talk about.
very dark. And I think I don't know that I knew as much about this scandal, just in the sense of like I knew that they had this like sort of drug fueled whatever. I knew that
Yeah.
she ended up dead. But to me, the more I research it, it's pretty evident that he just like
Yeah.
killed her. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, and then yeah, it's just, and I feel like you still talk about like, oh, we're a couple, we're like Sid and Nancy. It's like, that's not the couple you want to be like
Yeah.
emulating,
Yeah.
or like Bonnie and Clyde. Like they died, you know.
Well,
So
think about if
yeah,
you people like I won't say they idolize Sid Vicious, but he's an icon of punk. People try to
yes.
look like him. People try to dress like him, have the snarl, like the Billy Idol snarl. And the Sex Pistols are idolized. They're seen as a, but you don't see that with O.J. Simpson and Nicole. You don't see, oh, that he was not convicted, or he didn't do it apparently. But you don't see that like, hey,
It's
they're
almost like the drugs turn into this larger than life story rather than like
yeah,
a very tragic thing. And I
yeah,
totally, it's pretty amazing that people don't have such strong feelings about Sid Vicious now,
exactly.
because you know what I mean. Like I almost feel like you almost hear that as an afterthought, like, hey, he probably killed his girlfriend, right?
Yeah,
It's like, really? Like that is a scandal that feels like the legacy of the Sex Pistols as a band overrides. People know something
exactly.
crazy happened with his girlfriend, she died, he died, but
Yeah,
the specifics aren't as well documented, and it's
yeah,
pretty damning, I think. But
exactly. No one would say if you said, "Oh, Sid Vicious," you have posters or you have shirts, but you can't wear a shirt of OJ. I mean, that's an aggressive move, right?
no, I wouldn't do
It's
that.
like wearing a MAGA hat. It's like it's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah,
Um,
my OJ t-shirt eBay business has really hit the skids these days. If you want to lend me
no
a couple
businesses,
bucks.
right? Hurts. They have Tom Brady. They're not bringing back OJ. They're like, hey,
I know.
OJ, they're like, hey Tom, remember your old pal here? And there's OJ doing his like, spins around Tom. Like that would never be
No, I think there's very few people that are like truly perma cancel, but I would say OJ is probably one of them. I
I
think
mean,
that's pretty solid.
it could be an interesting Hertz campaign, right? If you had Lance Armstrong and you have OJ.
Just totally leaning into like bring everybody back and just like not
Every
acknowledging it at
like,
all.
like, everyone deserves a second chance. All right, but we're deviating. we're deviating a
We
bit.
digress.
We digress. Now, one that we did talk about, and especially we talked about the transition from 60s going into the 70s and kind of the dark side of drugs and freedom and all that, was the Altamont concert with the Rolling Stones. And for our audience here, if you've seen the movie Give Me Shelter, which is a story about that concert, it is disturbing. And Seth, what happened here? Because
Yeah,
it's a very sketchy story.
yes. So Altamont was basically a festival that happened in California, and it was almost like the bookend of the 60s,
Yeah.
the anti-Woodstock. It was this big fest that was put on a speedway, no kind of charm to it, but the lineup was incredible. They had, Jimi
Yeah.
Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane, the Rolling Stones, Janis Joplin, all these people. And for security, they had hired the Hells Angels, which back then the Hells Angels were sort of woven into the counterculture, and they were sort of like the thought was like, well, they're bad guys, but they're tough guys, and they're sort of the
Yeah.
hippie. They have a hippie mentality, but they're just a little rougher edge. So they're cheap and they'll keep people straight, and we won't need to pay cops because we don't want cops here.
Yeah.
So let's hire them as security. And as the fest went on, all the Hells Angels that they had hired, they got more drunk and they got more high and they got more violent.
Yeah.
And rather than protecting people, they started sort of being the aggressors and creating violence. And they were hitting people with pool sticks in the front section and
Yeah.
all this crazy, really violent stuff, to the point where the bands were freaked out and didn't want to play. I know they
Yeah.
threatened one of the guys in Jefferson Airplane, and he was like, dude,
Yeah.
I'm in the band. What's happening? Like that kind of thing. The Stones, I know, were terrified. The
Yeah.
very first scene of Gimme Shelter is I think it's Charlie Watts being shown footage
Yeah.
of that happening
Yeah.
the night when actually one person in the crowd was killed by the Hells
Yeah.
Angels. And you can tell he's totally like,
Yeah.
point being is they didn't endure, they were as shocked as the people in the crowd.
Yeah.
Like they were just like, we came here to play a show, and our understanding was these guys would keep the peace. They did the opposite, and we don't know what to do next. And then they kind of got the blame for it.
Yeah.
But it was, very, very scary and sort of marked, okay, this whole hippie thing where it's love and live and whatever, that's over now.
Yeah.
That's done. It
Yeah.
really was the kind of the door slamming on flower power, sort of. And it's a bummer, but inevitable.
It really was, and I encourage anyone to see it. It's really well done as a movie, but it goes into this. I don't even know if it's a scandal. It's something even more tragic, but uh, you can see how Mick responds live to a very uncomfortable situation. He stops the music, and in his London accent, and his cool it, everyone, cool out, cool out. He is on the thread of this thing just turning into chaos.
Yeah.
And
And it's like he doesn't understand. He's like,
yeah,
how could you do this?
yeah,
Why are we, it's
yeah,
like they can't comprehend
yeah,
what's happening in front of them. But it's again, it's booze and it's drugs and it's music and it's like it created this really toxic stew. And then you're having people who like got nothing to
yeah,
lose. These Hells Angels guys. Like I said, for like 3 years, like I've heard stories about like George Harrison was in San Francisco and
yeah,
casually he said to these Hells Angels guys, like, if you're ever in London, stop by Abbey Road. And
yeah,
like 2 months later, they got 20 motorcycles that got like drop shipped at Abbey Road, and all
yeah.
these Hells Angels just showed up. Like these guys were just like
Nuts.
kind of crazy, but somehow ingrained into this
Yeah,
world.
yeah. Well,
But that didn't last very long.
the Grateful Dead, all that, they were tied in some way, even the Doobie Brothers later. But going on a lighter note, but with a very dark side to it, is Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
Uh, this was they're not a boy band. They were two guys from Germany. They look very similar. I don't know how to explain that. Seth, I'll let you
Well, they have,
do
yeah,
that.
I would say they almost like they're German, but they almost have like they would wear
Uh,
very like late 80s like colorful sport coats, but they
yeah,
kind of look what we would think of as like Caribbean, right? Like long
exactly.
braids, and their music kind of had that sound to it
Yeah,
too. Two guys who look very similar, but were, they would sing and they would dance, and they were kind of boy band
yeah,
adjacent, I would say,
yeah,
but just two guys. And they were very famous. I mean, they
yeah,
won a Grammy for Record of the Year, I think.
yeah,
um they had 3 or 4 very big hits. I
yeah,
mean, very 1988, 89 ass music, like,
yeah.
poppy pop music. But then, Scott, what happened to them? Why don't you talk about it?
Well, so as you said, they got all this attention. They exploded on the scene, and it wasn't a one hit. They had one album essentially, but they had various hits on it, like a ballad and then a dancey song and whatnot. And they
Yep.
were on all the MTV dance shows because it was a weird mix. It was dancey. They had a routine like a boy band, but they were singing, right? It wasn't just dancing. Well, that's what we thought. It comes out they were lip singing the entire thing. They never sang on any of the album.
I was going to say, they weren't, to be clear, they were not lip syncing
No, not
at
this
the
on
concert to
stage.
their own audio.
Yeah,
They were basically had recorded a bunch of songs
yeah,
with these older singers
yeah,
who were good singers.
yeah,
And then because these guys were very good looking and kind of very
yeah,
cool and modern, they just lip synced over it, put them in. And this was, remember, the heyday of MTV.
yeah,
So people generally saw their videos before they saw them live.
yeah,
And they gained this huge following, and these songs became insanely popular because of that. And it turns out they never sang a note of any of the songs that they were known
yeah,
for, which, again, talk about a thing that could never happen in 2022.
yeah.
It is a very old school scandal, but it was a huge scandal nonetheless at the time.
Oh,
Huge.
it was huge, and obviously insanely humiliating to the members, but knew it. And there was behind the music, there was all these documentaries by the MTV network and everything trying to explain like how could this happen and whatnot. But really sad, one of the members, and I'm not sure who it was, died by suicide.
Yes, it
And
was Rob Pilotus. I was just
yeah,
researching this. So Rob and Fab are the two guys, and he died
yeah,
basically, yeah, alcohol and prescription pill induced suicide.
yeah,
But I think once that came out, so it happened in 1989. They were playing a show for
yeah,
MTV, like on tour. And it's very weird because it was like a skip. It played like the same line over and over,
yeah,
like "Girl, you know it's girl." It's very famous,
yeah.
but
Girl,
like, how
it's
does
true.
it tape skip? Like it wasn't a vinyl record. Like it seems almost like karmic that anything ever happened at
Yeah,
all that was able to be kind of like, to catch them red-handed on video. And it really like overnight sunk their career. They later tried to put out an album where they sang on it. It sold
yeah,
2,000 copies total. These are guys that won a Grammy and were like multi-platinum,
yeah,
2,000 copies. So pretty scandalous at the time. And again, they gave their Grammys back. It was a for 1989, it constituted a huge
Yeah.
musical scandal.
Yeah. Well, and it starts
Yeah.
to question, similar to doping in sports or steroids, you start to question the entire industry. Hey, wait, if
Yeah,
they did it and somehow they made it through, it's
it's a
such an
great point.
egregious, how do we trust that? Who's not doing it? Or how do we know? And you'll see, I think it was Ashley Simpson, Jessica Simpson's sister, that was on Saturday Night Live, and they found out she was lip singing. Now, she
Yeah.
recorded everything uh, originally, but she was essentially lying to the crowd, and it crushed her career, man. Crushed.
Yes. That was totally, and you can imagine people were just ready to make Milli Vanilli jokes. But at least she was,
Yeah.
like you said,
Yeah.
at least she was singing her own music. The fact that there was a time and place where you could get away with lip syncing as someone else and like no one questioned it. And
Yeah.
they had said, I read like a couple of people at MTV had said, like, we interviewed these guys as they were getting famous, and both of them, but especially one of them, like really didn't have a grasp of English, really.
Yeah.
It was German.
Yeah.
And so for these guys to be kind of sound very different
Yeah.
and be so eloquent on the record, but yet not be able to answer questions in an interview, like didn't add up.
Yeah.
But they were like, well, we don't know what we're accusing them of here, but like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And then that happened and everything fell apart. So that was that's a really good, clean, I mean, it had a dark ending, I guess, but
Yeah.
that's just like a ridiculous, funny, fun, crazy musical scandal, I think.
Well, Seth, as we wrap up here, what if let's say you're a industry exec and you need to create some PR for one of your artists, what scandal do you think you could make that would break the internet?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's some sort of video, some sort of like found footage, or captured behind the scenes of another celebrity. I think it's like get them in some sort of something with other people who have a huge following.
Yeah.
We don't, it's not about the music. The scandal needs to be relationship related or beef related, but punch up, I think is the appropriate strategic scandal move. Is pick someone that has a lot more clout and a lot more followers than you and punch up, call them out, fight them in a bar, whatever it is. I think that's how you get yourself on the front lines, and then people know your name, and then if your music is good, that the attention will follow. But yeah, I think that would be my PR solve for getting some page views.
Yeah, I think cheating or trying to get someone like who's seen as innocent, and I think those are all done. I think it would have to be not like I think almost this like Bob Marley style, this very intricate story that Jay-Z, for example, was involved in a subversive cooperation with the Russian militant, or some story that is so bizarre but actually happens to be true, or something where
almost like I'm thinking of like Dennis Rodman's like best friends with North Korea, something like that, like really crazy.
I think it has to be like he started COVID and he did it so Kanye started COVID so he could be able to something where
something absurd.
Like, it's so absurd, but there are those people out there that go, yeah, I think it does happen. I think he is stealing babies and they're alien babies, or there's something quite bizarre.
And they're in a pizza shop basement, blah, blah, blah. There's true. You'll always find believers, but I think you need to be, you got to think big these days, because a minor scandal will not fly.
It is. You have to go.
You got to go big.
And it's got to be layered, and you got to have Kanye in it somehow. I think then you're good. Well, anyways, listen, hopefully Seth, this weekend we'll have scandal-free weekends. Hopefully I'll do
no
something.
Promises, but
yeah, I'd say if there's something we could do for D-side stories, I'm totally up. If anyone wants to recommend a scandal that I can be involved with, that may give us some awareness. That'd be fantastic. So
I will bare knuckle box Scott for if someone wants to sponsor this podcast.
Be gentle, man. Be gentle. Just don't hit the double chin like it's.
I can't. I got a lot of target to aim for there, so gotta be careful.
All right, everyone. Well, hey, listen. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Cool. See you, Scott.
See you guys.